I'm Abby Gewirtz. I am a professor both at Arizona State University, never say University of Arizona, and the Hebrew University in the School of Social Work. I'm a clinical psychologist by training and a prevention scientist. Prevention science is a very, it's not really a field here so much in Israel. It's pretty well developed in the United States. It's the science of the development and testing of in our case, mental health interventions to promote resilience in children, youth, families, individuals. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about parenting interventions, preventive parenting interventions, and what they have to do with substance use. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about studies that show how we use rigorous randomized trials to show the link between strengthening parenting and reducing substance use or preventing substance use. I'm not going to talk much about the need in Israel because that's already been overviewed. I'll talk a little bit about the work that we've just started doing in Israel. I just first of all want to acknowledge, so most of the research I'm going to be talking to you about was done in the United States. So we have an amazing team. And we have studied almost 1,000 military families in the United States. Across 4 randomized clinical trials. These are families for whom a parent was sent to war in Iraq or Afghanistan. They're reserve component families like Miluimnikim here, but the life is very different. Our funders were the National Institutes of Health, as well as the Department of Defense in the United States. We're very grateful to them. So just to be very clear, what are evidence-based parenting interventions? They are theory-based programs that strengthen parenting practices, that is, the methods by which parents socialize their children. These interventions may be delivered using multiple formats, from light touch, online, self-directed, the resources you might get on Instagram, to in-person, one-on-one interventions, both over the internet and also like telehealth and also face-to-face. Okay, and these programs are tested using randomized controlled trials, not single pre-post group designs, but trials where you randomly assign people either to get the intervention or to get something else. As anybody who does drug development knows, it's the only way to truly test whether a program is effective. But more important to that, how it's effective, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. And of course, the assumption is that parents are their children's first and most important teachers, and that strengthening parenting reduces risk and enhances children's resilience. So I'm going to talk about 2 theories. The family stress model. Family stress model has been around for many, many years, and it shows how stressful events within or outside the family impact the family by increasing parents' stress, and when parents are stressed, they stress their children. So we see more negative or coercive parenting and increased risk for most people have studied actually youth substance use and externalizing behaviors. Our work is primarily on families affected by traumatic events. We see also risks in internalizing anxiety, PTSD, depression, things like that. And then social interaction learning theory, which the father of which was Gerald Patterson, which really forms the theoretical basis for all parent training interventions that you may know of. That explains the micro, on the micro level, how dysfunctional parent-child interactions raise the risk for children to engage with deviant peers, engage in risky behaviors like substance use, risky sexual behaviors, truancy, and then later on other kinds of problems. But the good news is that we know that parenting is malleable. We can change parenting, and we have decades of fantastic research showing that if you use evidence-based programming, you can improve parenting, and that has cascading effects across the generations. And we're not talking about like treatment effects where you see great relief after treatment, and then, in prevention programs, effect sizes grow over time. It's quite remarkable. So just want to give a little plug for randomized trials. Are very hardcore. So theories help us understand why and how problems manifest, and randomized trials test theories, and they provide information on the effectiveness of an intervention. But they also help us understand what changes, when it changes, and how one change begets other change. So, for example, I talked about cascading effects, and I'll share a little bit in the next slide. So randomized trials help us understand how change happens, and mediators of change. So what changes first and what changes second, and also what magnifies or constricts the impact of the intervention. So, for example, risk factors, I think Devorah talked about it, was also talked about in the panel, that might make an intervention work less well or better. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So different risk profiles, for example. So let's briefly, I just want to sort of overview parenting programs that have been shown to prevent substance use. So these tend to focus on a population at risk for higher youth substance use, divorcing families, that's a known risk factor, bereaved families where a parent has died, military deployment is a risk factor, that's our research, because these family stresses are linked to higher youth substance use. And so we now have a body of studies with up to 19 years of follow-up. So we're talking about parenting interventions that were implemented when children were 5 and have been followed into their 20s or sometimes into their 30s. For example, my colleague Charlene Woolchick's program called New Beginnings and Marian Forgatch's Parenting Through Change program, both for divorcing families. New Beginnings, 15-year follow-up showed reduced drug abuse. 15 years after a 12 or 14 session program. Like, think about that. That's a generation. 15 years later, the kids of the parents who received the program were significantly less likely to use drugs with meaningful effects. Parenting Through Change, they use, the time limits are just the limits of what your grants are going to pay for. So in Marian Forgatch's case, 9-year reduced drug use among both boys and mothers. And by the way, in Parenting Through Change, they showed, we have what we call crossover effect. So we're focusing here on drug use, but in the Parenting Through Change program, 9 years later, socioeconomic status had changed. There's an article about lifting families out of poverty. Education, occupation, and income improved significantly in the single mother families that were provided the intervention, using intent to treat design, just for those of you who are randomized trial groupies. In Owen Sandler's program, family bereavement program, now known as Resilient Parenting for Bereaved Families, they have 5-year follow-up data showing indirect effects on substance use, suicidality, and other risks. In Carol Comfort's Strengthening Families program, they have lower rates on all substance use or a 10-year follow-up, with 12th graders, so Kita Yudbet, 2 to 6 times less likely to use drugs. And our program, after deployment adaptive parenting tools, henceforth known as ADAPT, for families exposed to the deployment of a parent to war. Our 2-year follow-up, that was the extent of our grant funding, showed reduced substance use intentions among youth. We had very young, our kids were 5, 6, 7 years old at the beginning, so we could only look at intentions. I think I don't need this slide. It's clear that we really need to do work on supporting families in Israel, not just for substance use prevention, but because families have been so stressed during the war. I'll talk a little bit at the end about our work with families where a parent had been on miluim for 200, 300 more days, and there's one parent looking after the kids, and everybody's stressed. And it's very unlike the US situation, where in the US, the father, typically it's the father went off to war, and the mother stayed home, but she wasn't in a war situation. So she didn't have to worry about the family's safety in the home front, but about the parent in the front line. Also, in the US situation, parents are gone, and they're gone for like 9 months or a year, and they never see their family at all. Whereas here you have this sort of what in the US they call rapid cycling, where you might come back every weekend or every other weekend, but you're not really there because you know you have to go back again. And that's a very complicated situation. So I will just say that in Israel, my understanding, I did as much searching as I could, but through the grey literature as well, it looks like there are some evidence-informed parenting interventions. I could not find a parenting intervention, at least the age range that we work with, which is not preschool, it's the entry to school, so from 5 till 12, couldn't find a single randomized trial. So it looks like there are no evidence-based interventions here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what an evidence-based intervention is. I'm going to use our program ADAPT because then I can talk to you a little bit about what we're doing here in Israel. ADAPT is a program for families exposed to traumatic events such as war and related violence. It's based in social interaction theory. It's one of the family of Generation Parent Management Training Oregon model programs, and it was designed to prevent child psychopathology, child and youth substance use, internalizing, externalizing problems when families, parents in particular, have been exposed to traumatic events. And what we know, of course, is exposure to trauma, whether or not you come back from war with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, disrupts our emotion regulation capacities. And so our focus was on helping parents not just with the behavioral elements of parenting, teaching through encouragement, positive parenting, monitoring, things like that, which are very important for preventing youth substance use, but also helping parents deal with emotion dysregulation and helping socialize their children in dealing with emotions. So we have emotion coaching, emotion regulation skills, a lot of mindfulness exercises, a very, very small dose. I have a sample module because I always believe it's good to show rather than tell. I fear you won't be able to hear anything. So if you can't hear, please shake your head. But I just want to show you the kind of thing that ADAPT. So ADAPT is a parenting program that can be delivered in person in groups of 10 to 15 parents. It can be delivered once a week, 2 hours for 12 to 14 weeks. It can be delivered in a workshop. We've done like half-day workshops, 4 half-day workshops. It can be delivered via telehealth, one-on-one, and it can be delivered online. And what I really wanted to show you was one module of the online program. This is somewhere in the middle of the program. The first module that I usually like to show people is a very behavioral module about helping, being very clear in communicating with children around what you expect from them. For this group, I think it's more relevant to show this module about how parents can help their children, but how to help parents respond to difficult emotions. I think so what you'll see here is an interview with 2 parents, one of whom was sent to deploy in Iraq. And then if we're lucky, you'll hear. If not, I'll just show you the vignette. No, sorry. Okay.
I returned from deployment. The reintegration into life was very, very hard, actually. And everybody had changed because they had lived their lives and grown, and I had come from this very harsh place.
Both kids felt that he was impeding on Mom's time, and he was, now back in the house again, and why is he telling us what to do?
When I left, she was 18 months old. When I came back, she was just over 2 years. When I had left for Iraq, she could only go to the end of the driveway without an adult, and when I came back, she could go talk to her friend across the street, and I thought she was running into the street, and I shouted at her, and she got upset and cried and told me, "I hate you, I want you to leave." Through a lot of work with her individually and having her mom take breaks to go away and do things, and me intentionally spending time with my daughter to overcome that.
And so we had to learn how to accommodate their feelings, but let them know that Dad was back to stay.
Respond to difficult emotions. You can reduce family conflicts by choosing how you act in response to difficult emotions. We can all use strategies that help us regulate our emotions over the long run, like regular exercise, a healthy diet, and spending time with family and friends. But sometimes difficult situations can trigger negative emotions.
Where is she?
Did you check her room?
I told her to be ready 15 minutes ago.
I'm ready.
Hey, what is wrong with you? I told you to be ready 15 minutes ago.
Jeez, can't you just chill out?
You do not speak to me that way, young lady. Do you understand?
What with you?
What's wrong with me? She
Why
is still.
are you flying off the handle?
She is here. She's not ready.
When you don't regulate your response, emotions drive how you act. Unregulated responses to negative emotions make situations worse. Or you can regulate your response. You can't choose your emotions, but you can regulate your response to them.
Honey, please get up and get ready right now. Hey, what is wrong with you?
Unregulated emotional responses follow a pattern. A situation triggers an emotion, which leads to a response.
Hey,
It's a pattern that happens so quickly it seems automatic. But you can take a different route. You can choose to regulate your response. To do this, Dad is going to pause, breathe, and notice what he's feeling before he acts.
honey, please get up and get ready right now.
Pause. Pausing before you act interrupts the automatic pattern of response. It gives you time to regain your balance. Breathe. Taking at least 3 deep breaths has the physiological effect of slowing your heart rate and calming you down. Notice. Noticing what you're thinking and feeling has a psychological effect. It allows you, not your momentary thoughts and feelings, to be in control. Pause, breathe, and notice helps you maintain positive relationships.
Honey, please get up and get ready right now.
Hey, Dad, guess what we're doing in school tomorrow?
Come over here and tell me.
We're gonna have science class and we're...
Regulating.
Okay, I think we have enough here. What's interesting is you were all laughing, right, when he did the right way, when he came in and breathed. It looks so simple, but of course, it's the hardest thing to do as a parent. My colleague one of my dear colleagues used to say, the family is the crucible for strong emotions. And emotions that we wouldn't show anywhere else, we show in our family. And so, it's not just this one video that's going to help parents change. It's throughout the 14 weeks or the 10 modules that we have in the online program that we're going to help families regulate. Why did my... what happened here? מה קרה? זה לא עובד. So, I'm just going to, while he's fixing it, hopefully he'll fix it. I'm just going to share a little bit about the, I'll share a little bit about the studies that we have done. So this program ADAPT we developed it about 15 years ago in response to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan in the US. We tested it first in a group-based format, a 14-week group. Parents came 14 times, 2 hours each time. We randomly assigned 336 families, 60% of them to the intervention, 40% of them to services as usual group, and we followed them for 2 years. And then what we found we have 45 papers on the randomized trial, so I'm really trying to shorten it a lot. But what we found was that the intervention had an intent to treat main effect on parenting, not based on what parents said alone, because parents did report, of course, that they felt better. What changed first, by the way, was that parents felt that they felt more effective. And that was very powerful. That was a very powerful mechanism of change. That parental efficacy, the improvement in parental efficacy, actually moved indicators of suicidality and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. subsequent, 6 months subsequent. But our primary outcome variable was what we observed parenting. So we went into families' homes at baseline 1 year and 2 years and videotaped them. And the people who coded the videotapes had no idea who was in the intervention group and who was in the control group. And we had a main effect on parenting. And that in turn, as we predicted, mediated changes, improvements in children's outcomes as indexed not just by what parents told us about their children, but also by what teachers told us and by what children themselves told us. At 1 year, global measures of adjustment, and at 2 years, a paper that we just submitted for publication on effects on both main and mediated effects of the intervention on youth substance use intentions. We then, the Department of Defense became interested in the program and then asked us if we would be interested in developing more formats and testing those formats. So our second study compared 3 different formats of the intervention, and we have a third study, which we also finished, which was called a sequential multiple assignment randomized trial. And it's kind of cool, if you're like geeky like me, that you can use different kinds of interventions to understand what works for whom. In our whole population, we have public health people here. In the whole population, as was said in the earlier panel, not everyone needs everything. Some people only need a tiny bit, maybe a little online, maybe like this online program, maybe not even that, maybe little bits of advice on Instagram. Some people need face-to-face, one-on-one. Other people, a group is beneficial. By the way, it's not, it may be that some people, I think it was mentioned in the earlier panel, they love the support that a group provides them. Others don't want to talk in front of a group. They only want one-on-one support. And so in our second study, which was a comparative effectiveness trial, we simply randomized 244 families to military families to either online only, telehealth only, one-on-one, or a group-based program. And what we found, we predicted a non-inferiority hypothesis, which was that we predicted that both the online, the telehealth, so having a facilitator, sorry, you're going to just have to listen to me. You won't see my beautiful slides. That having a facilitator was better, broadly speaking, just across the whole sample. It was better to be in a facilitated format overall than the online self-directed format. Whether you were in a group or whether you were one-on-one in telehealth, didn't matter. They were roughly equivalent. And what I would imagine is that for some people, one is better, for other people, it's better, but overall, those are more effective than the online self-directed. However, of course, when you test whether an intervention works or not, main effects, you don't really know what's going on inside. And the idea, and the idea is that for some people, one thing might be better. So we've done a couple of moderation analyses. Surprise, surprise. If you are so cool, thank you. If you had better parental efficacy at baseline, if you had better parental efficacy at baseline, okay, and you perceived your children to have fewer problems, then guess what worked better? Actually, the online program. So you really didn't need to see a facilitator. But if you had mental health problems, parents with mental health problems, parents who had less confidence about their parenting, they did better in a facilitated program. Okay, so that's just the slide with all the trials. So program impact, I talked a little bit about self-efficacy, I talked about couple parenting, I talked about substance use, I talked about depression, PTSD, and suicidality. By the way, the program, totally counter to our expectations, had main effects, directly reduced mothers' PTSD over 2 years, which we were kind of surprised at, but thrilled with. We also found that for fathers high in experiential avoidance and children higher in internalizing problems, those fathers did better in the intervention in the sense that basically what it did was there was a subset of fathers high in avoidance, who had really a difficult time in the interactions, the videotaped interactions with their children. One of the interaction tasks was talk to your child about a difficult issue that happened while you were deployed. And the fathers who were high in avoidance, as you would imagine, those of you who sort of do PTSD, they didn't want to talk about it with their kids. Kids would get upset. They would say, oh, don't worry, let me get you a cookie. Those fathers learned through the intervention to be able to sit with and have skills to respond to their children's negative emotions, difficult emotions, and that in turn improved their parenting. We also found genetic moderation. I'm happy to tell you more, probably not now, but that in fathers, just briefly, in fathers who were genetically vulnerable to alcohol abuse, in the context of high combat, the intervention dampened that. So it reduced the alcohol use of fathers who were genetically vulnerable in the intervention group. And then other findings. So essentially, we are changing social interaction patterns in the family over time. And when you change parenting, other things change too. And I just want to sort of end with this idea that there's no one size fits all. And I talked a little bit about this public health approach. And we offer these different kinds of interventions in the sense that, not just for what families need, but we also know that families want different things. And we need to respond in mental health to what families want. So I talked a little bit about the different formats. We did find that participation was higher in virtual formats. It's much more convenient than in face-to-face formats. Interestingly enough, I didn't talk about the results of our most recent sequential multiple assignment SMART trial, but what we found was that which tests both dose and sequence of intervention. But that we found that the best first-line format for improving parental efficacy was the online program. But if you needed more, what was interesting was your best sequence was to go to a workshop and then an ongoing group. And again, I'm happy to talk more to those who are interested. Essentially, the bottom line is most people need a relatively light touch. But some people need more intensive work. We've started delivering ADAPT in Israel. We completed one group in Modi'in. Our groups filled up in one day. Our families came throughout. It was mothers and fathers who'd served more than 300 days in Miluim. They reported really being able to use the skills and enjoying the group. We now are starting a group this week in Netanya. Also, it filled up in like 3 days. And we are developing ADAPT online in partnership with an educational software company called Compedia. It'll be available in Hebrew, Arabic. Was that a one or a? That was a one. That was a one. Okay. And we're hoping to be able to sustain. That's the big challenge. And so in conclusion, evidence-based interventions really work. They really work. And they can provide a public health approach to substance use by offering tiered interventions. Research on tailoring interventions is in early stages, but it's very promising. The biggest challenge is implementation and dissemination. And I think in Israel, we know that there are many, many different things happening. And there's very little, my understanding is, with the exception of organizations, I can't see her now, like Natal, there's an ICAM, there's very little quality control. And I think there's very little known about what works. And I think that's the biggest challenge. So I will stop there. There's lots of publications, and thank you.